Hey, welcome back. If for me it's only been about 40 seconds, I don't know how long it's been for you. But I know I said I'd answer the Xbox question first, but I wanted to answer something else really quick. I meant to answer in the previous video right at the beginning. Whenever I start my game reviews up again, whenever I finish my project and actually get it done and post it out there and publish and all that, I will be working on getting podcasts actually happening. I don't know the exact mechanics of how this is going to function. From my limited understanding at the moment, what's going to happen is I'm going to finish these videos here at work because this is where I have the time and the facility to do so and to record in a sound-free environment. And then I'm going to take those home via flash drive, rip the audio out of the video files, and then post that on the thing, and then figure out how to get that onto the iPod. I actually have no idea how that works. I need to do more looking into it. But that is something I'm definitely looking into for any of those of you who care. Now, the Xbox question. The reason I've been delaying on this is actually a little more complicated than just why do you not own an Xbox. The question comes down to how do you judge a console? For me, I don't know how much I've gone into detail about this because I've been preparing for this question for a while because I knew it was coming at some point. A console is not something I judge based on the fact that it has good graphics engine. It has a large hard drive. It has Wi-Fi capacity. It has Bluetooth capacity. It has, the PSN built in. It has Xbox Live built in. It has motion controls. It has Kinect. None of these things matter to me, and I mean that sincerely. I mean that almost to an 100% degree. They are tertiary at best. I also don't care about price within reason, and I'll explain that a little bit in detail as soon as I get into this. What a console means to me is its game library. Ultimately, a console could be very expensive and crap, but if it has a magnificent game library and a lot of it, then I will buy it. That is what matters to me, is the library of games. That is what matters to me, is what is actually available on the console. So, for example, the NES was an easy buy for me. Now, granted, I didn't actually buy the NES, my dad did, but point being, if the NES were to come out right now with the entirety of its game library, and my knowledge of it, I would buy it like that. I wouldn't even hesitate, and I would pay full price. I would probably pay even more for it. The SNES, I would pay $400 for a SNES if it came out right now and if it was brand new, because there are so many fantastic and art games that are on that console, and good games and great games. So it justifies itself. All consoles have to justify themselves for me with their game library. The reason I bought a Wii was not because I like motion controls. Quite the contrary. I actually don't like motion controls. I find it irritating when I have to do the flick in some of those games. However, there were a lot of games I genuinely enjoyed and genuinely wanted on the Wii, so the Wii justified itself based on its library. Now you're probably seeing where this is going. The Xbox has two types of games on it. Xbox exclusives and games that are already out on the PC. In general, if a game comes out on a console and a PC, I will get it on the PC. It tends to be cheaper, I tend to enjoy playing it more, and I can play it at more locations, and easier. So, especially if it's on Steam or something like that. So, when you say the Xbox has, for example, KOTOR or Mass Effect, I say yes, and I have that right here on my laptop. If it has, I'm trying to think of another example here, Fable 1, there we go. I have that on the PC, etc., etc. So any game that the Xbox has that the PC also has does not count in its favor. Actually, quite the contrary, it counts against it because I already have that game on the PC, if you follow me. And I prefer playing games on the PC in general of that type. For example, I prefer Dragon Age on a PC. I prefer KOTOR on the PC. I prefer Mass Effect on the PC because I prefer that control schema. Now, this is not a PC versus console debate. I just want to get that out there. I know that debate is still raging, and I know nothing's ever going to quell it. But I am not a PC gamer, and I am not a console gamer. I am a gamer. All I'm explaining is why I tend to prefer playing most of the Xbox games on PC. A lot of them are RPGs, which I tend to prefer with this kind of format when it's a Western-style RPG. You with me? Now, that just leaves Xbox exclusive titles and games I don't, care about. And the Xbox exclusive titles that I do care about, I think at this point numbers at like 3. And that's the unfortunate truth of it, is that there are something like 3 games on the Xbox that I would like to play. But 3 games does not justify a system. And so that is why I do not own an Xbox, and in the foreseeable future will not, unless that changes. And I know that sounds horrible because that technically sounds like I'm encouraging exclusives titles. I actually hate exclusive titles. I like having the option of picking, Sonic Generations, for example. I liked the fact that I could pick which I wanted to get that on. I was actually sincerely debating getting that on the PS3, actually, because, you know, that kind of game works with the controller really well. And then I realized I could do that on the PC with my actual USB controller. But point being, I like those options, and I prefer people to do multi-platform releases rather than exclusive to blah. But that would be the reason why I don't own an Xbox. And I do apologize to any Xbox users, but I want to stress something, that I have nothing against the Xbox at all. And in fact, if I did not own a PC, this is important. If I did not have a gaming PC, two gaming PCs actually, if I did not have top of the line systems that I made and built, like this one and the one I have at home, then I probably would have an Xbox, because getting a PC like this is expensive. If I wasn't already in the PC market, and I wanted to play Fable, I wanted to play Mass Effect, I wanted to play Halo, I wanted to play KOTOR, then guess what? I would go out and buy an Xbox, because I wouldn't want to buy a PC just for those games, if you follow me. So I really have nothing against the Xbox, and I really don't. I want to stress this for like the 15th time, so nobody misunderstands me. This is not me bashing anything. This is just me explaining why I personally do not own one, and for the immediate future will not. Now, finally answered the question. 6 minutes for one answer. Um, let's continue with the Q&A here and hopefully get the rest of these done tonight. Oh my, it's much later than I thought it was. Okay, what is your opinion on the Legend of Zelda series, and Ocarina of Time in particular, or Ocarina if you prefer? I have a comment that I'm going to share about the Legend of Zelda series, and you may take from it what you will. With the exception of the or the DSi? What was the name of those? OSI? I can't even remember. There were two games that don't actually count. Let's just fling them out the window. With the exception of those two things that don't count and never existed, as far as I'm concerned, there's never been a bad Legend of Zelda game. Ever. There's never been a game in that series I have disliked. There's never been a game in that series that has not been at least in the great category. I love Legend of Zelda, and I think they've been doing quality for a while. The worst Legend of Zelda game I could probably think of is actually probably... I'm actually not going to answer that, so because that wasn't asked, and you know what, whatever. Ocarina of Time was a fantastic game. That was worth getting an N64 for, basically by itself. Obviously, there were other games that justified the N64's existence, such as Paper Mario, which is probably my favorite N64 game. But Ocarina of Time was amazing and very well done, and took the LTTP concept into 3D very well, I think. And I have nothing but good things to say about Zelda, for the most part. And for those of you who are curious, by the way, I am playing Skyward Sword very slowly. Every Wednesday, I play with a little bit of backseat driving, which is a concept I'd have to explain, so let's just move on, with a couple friends of mine. And for various reasons, I basically only get an hour or two of that in a week. And that's when we can do it. So I've been inching my way through that game bit by bit, and I will be doing a full review of Skyward Sword when I finish it. Next question. What is my opinion on changing the protagonist of a series with each subsequent game, whilst turning the previous character into supporting character, such as they did with the Modern Warfare series? Do I think they could do this in an interesting way with Dragon Age 3, getting the Warden and Hawk to join your group with their own personalities and appearances based on your imports? I think that's a great idea if pulled off properly. I do think Modern Warfare did that very well, and I do think that they could pull that off really well if they wanted to. It would have been interesting to see that in a game another example of that that they could have done, I guess, it would be KOTOR. But if they did it a KOTOR 3, for example, rather than Tor, having the third game include Revan and the Exile would have made a lot of sense and would have been interesting, or at least having them as part of the party members, or maybe the main party members, something like that. Basically, what I'm saying is I agree with that concept, and I think if done properly, it is an excellent idea. Next question. What do you think of the Halo universe? And then there's a lot of extra that this person went along talking about it, but he was mentioning that I tend to describe reboots in a derogatory term. The truth is that when I call a reboot derogatory, it's because that reboot is. I have nothing against reboots in general, and sometimes I think they're well done and proper. You know, the recent Batman movies is an excellent example and a very obvious and easy target for an example of a reboot that was well done. I also personally stand by Castlevania Lords of Shadows, that reboot, if you want to call it that, since that's basically just another timeline and they've never done another one, so maybe it's not an actual reboot, but you get the idea. It's not something I'm against in general. As far as Halo specific is concerned, and my thoughts on the Halo universe, I actually think the setting is very interesting, and I would like to play the Halos all the way through at some point in time. Obviously, that's probably not happening, maybe in the distant future, maybe if I win the lottery, you know. But the point is that it is an interesting setting, it does intrigue me, It's not probably one of my favorites, because I have read up on it, and I have looked at the novels. I haven't actually read them myself, but they are good, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. I have no negative comments to make here, so moving on. What do you use as your video capture software? This is something called Live Central, and that sounds ignorant because it is. It came with, and it came with my OS, and so I think it's the default Windows video capture, if I'm honest. It works for me because it uses the webcam I have built into the monitor here, and it was free basically. It sounds like you've played DDO. Will you be willing to do a review of DDO? I could do that. I have played DDO extensively. I don't have a lot of good things to say about DDO. At the same time, I do. It's one of those weird games where it's like, it would be amazing except for this. There's just this one concept that just kills it. And so I may do a review of DDO in the future. I'll put it on the list, and we'll see when we get there. But again, it's one of those really weird games. DDO is a game that if I had infinite money, would not bother me at all. But I really dislike a game where I play it and I'm enjoying it, and I'm getting into it, and please insert 5 quarters to continue. That's not what actually happens, but you have to pay for content. You have to pay to get further ahead in the game. You have to pay to do this dungeon, I don't like that. I never have. And that, I think, is the worst example of the FTP model, is having to pay in order to access content. I don't like that, and I never have. And Lotro's been doing that lately, too, unless you subscribe. So, moving on. This is a question I'm going to answer strangely. Are you an atheist, an agnostic, a believer, or neither? The reason I'm going to answer this strangely is I'm not actually going to answer the question. What I am going to do is explain why I'm going to answer why I'm not answering the question. The expected why not. The reasoning is because, in my personal opinion, that sort of thing is a very personal thing, right? It's something that's with you and your belief. And when I use the term belief, I'm referring to something that's much more core than most people use when they use that term. This is something that is truly yourself, something that is truly something you hold dear, basically regardless. Regardless of circumstance, regardless of situation, regardless of time, this is still you, no matter what else changes on the surface and even in the middle ground here. This remains the same. And that's a very personal thing. And so I've never been very much in favor of for example, I tend to be very respectful of other people and how they think and how they believe and how they feel, because I believe that's how it should be. I think I should be respectful of you, and I have no right, is basically what I'm saying, to say you're wrong. I have no right to say you should think this way. I have no right to ridicule you. I have no right to mock you. That doesn't work that way. Now, if you come to me and say you slap 12 clowns upside down wearing pink every Sunday, and that's your belief, then yeah, I'm probably going to be like, oh, really? Because that's not a belief. That has nothing to do with the belief. That's something you do. That's a ritual. A belief is not something I'm going to mock or ridicule, and so there's that. There's the respect thing. There's my desire, my interest in respecting others and their thoughts. And part of that also includes me not imposing on other people. And this leads me back into the final argument, or the final comment. In my experience, in my last several decades of years, anytime this topic comes up, it ends badly. Very, 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 very few people can actually discuss what they believe in a real manner. I can actually think of one person I know ever across my life, and oh my goodness, I'm getting a phone call. I'm gonna have to chop this up. It's AT&T, isn't it? That is AT&T. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hang up on them because I know exactly what they're gonna tell me, and that's an automated message. Moving on. So my point is, it almost always ends badly, and so even admitting, that I am a blah, or that I'm a blah, or I think blah, tends to murk the waters in a way I don't think is necessary. And I might also point out that I personally don't think a label is something that should explain everything you believe to the core of your being in one word, Let me use a theoretical example. If I were to say I'm Christian, that statement is so generic. That's like saying I'm human. There is so much more that sits underneath that, and there are so many variances, and there's so much difference based on individual opinions and individual beliefs. So that's my answer as to why I'm not answering that question. I apologize for the length there. Next question about Mass Effect 3. Completely shifting topics from religion to Mass Effect 3. Do you think there is no religion because there is no God because Mass Effect 3? Yes! No, I'm sorry. Do I think that people would have liked James Vega better if BioWare had allowed proper dialogue conversation in Mass Effect 3? Yes. And if they fleshed out his character and backstory more? Yes. And if he was made an actual romance option for femships? Yes. I do actually think James Vega should have been done more with. He felt so cheap. He felt so, I'm a newbie. And he felt like he was completely out of place. That's really my biggest problem with him. His attitude personally bothered me, but I could have gone with that if they had done more with him. And instead, he was just a jock, basically. He was just a grunt who was like, yo, and acting like he belonged there with no backstory. Garrus doesn't have to act like he belongs there because he does. He's earned that right. He worked up to that. James Vega is plopped on us, and we say, all right, here's your new character. Live with it. You can't just do that. You have to work up to that. Even Javik, the Prothean, felt like they did more build-up and they did more exploration of his backstory and his personality than they did with James Vega. And there's something wrong with that. So, that's just my thought. What are your thoughts on Faxanadu? I'm amazed. I guess I shouldn't say that. Most people probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Faxanadu was an amazing NES game that was sort of an RPG, and it was also a side-scroll action-adventure kind of game. Hard to describe, but it was really good, and I do recommend it for anybody who can get a hold of a copy of it. Back in the NES, Faxanadu, Faxanadu. It was definitely one of those hidden gem games. Definitely a diamond in the rough game because so few people heard about that. So few people even know it existed. Even people who are big NES fans are like, what? Faxanadu? I still have my copy of that. And it was a fantastic game. I loved it. And more in-depth story than you'd really expect from a NES game. So, hey. Have you ever had a coworker come up behind you in the middle of one of your videos and ask, what the heck are you doing? I gather you're alone most of the time, but surely someone has walked in unexpectedly. No, that has never happened. I want to stress this. The whole building I'm in, obviously you have no idea of the concept or scale here, but the building goes about, I don't know, 500 feet that way and like 700 feet that way and about 200 feet that way and about another 300 feet that way. This is not a small building. It is only 2 stories, but whatever. I am the only person in this entire building. I am the night staff. I am the only one that keeps this place running after hours. And that's one of the reasons why I always have my work going in the background. I have my monitoring software going in the background. I'm always, doing that, and occasionally I have to edit out the chunks of the video because I either get a call or I have something I have to deal with. So, no, I have no one who bothers me here because there is no one here to bother me. It doesn't happen. Next question. Oh, also, as a side note, if someone else was in the building for whatever reason, if they were doing an after-hours maintenance, which does happen, if they were doing a switch of a switch, or we were swapping out one of our big routers, or anything like that, like the Foundry, then I wouldn't do one of these videos because there'd be people here. What is your opinion on whether or not ESO and Elder Scrolls 6 are mutually exclusive? Whether or not they are depends a lot on how well ESO sells, because that's still being done under the umbrella that will potentially share budgetary concerns with Bethesda, the actual team, the actual creative team. And so if ESO does well, it is possible that that money can be funneled back into Bethesda, the developing staff, and then actually make Elder Scrolls 6, with awesomeness, as usual. They've never disappointed me before. But if they were mutually exclusive, which would I pick? Elder Scrolls 6, in a nutshell, and without hesitation. And there's only one reason for that. ESO has promise, ESO has potential. I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but Elder Scrolls 6 will be good because it's made by Bethesda. Those people, I was using the example with BioWare when I was talking about Mass Effect 3, about how much trust they've built up with the goodness of the games they've done over the years and how several companies have that. No company has that more than Bethesda for me. They've only done the 5 games, like ever, 6 games, I'm sorry. But they've never been bad. They have always been way up there. They have never been less than the art category for me. And so, in their respective era, I have to say that because that's talking from Daggerfall all and on, because I didn't get on board with Arena. But they've never disappointed me, and they've never done less than amazing. So my trust would automatically be in Bethesda. Have you played the Ultima series? Yes, I have. If so, which one is your favorite? That'd probably be Ultima 5, but I can't give a really good reason why. It was on the NES. I guess this would be the reason, and so I had easy access to it, and I played it a lot on the NES. And it was enjoyable, even though it was amazingly, ridiculously difficult and poorly explained. And that's one of those weird things about those games. You only really enjoy them because you know what you're doing, if you follow me. If you play those games and have no idea what you're doing, it's just frustrating. So I always have to have that little boilerplate. That, yes, they're great, except for this. So, what are your thoughts on Amnesia: The Dark Descent? I don't personally get into horror games like that, as I think I've mentioned before, but Amnesia: The Dark Descent does appear to be very well constructed, and I've seen a lot of good things about it, and several people whose opinions I trust have told me it's a good game, and so overall my thoughts are that if you're into that kind of concept, if you're into that sort of genre, it is good and it is enjoyable, and I do recommend it. Hmm, goodness. Can you make a Facebook page for me to become a fan of? No, I cannot. Uh, for those of you who watch South Park, you'll probably get the reference here, but I do not wish to feed the machine here. I do not wish to become part of the Tronverse that is Facebook. But in all honesty, I do not like Facebook personally. Never have. I have actually made it a point of never joining Facebook over these long years, and I am going to continue making a point of not joining Facebook. So I do apologize, but no, I'm not making a Facebook page. Moving on. Do you believe LucasArts as a developer is effectively dead, considering they used to make such great games in the late 80s and early 90s? Yes and no. I do think they've lost their way. It's obvious the development team, they have moved on. I don't have to say it's obvious. I know that fact. The people who are behind all the late greats, like Maniac Mansion and Indiana Jones and the Tales of Monkey Island, those were all fantastic games, and they were gold. They were golden. They were amazing. But it is worth noting that LucasArts has made some good games throughout the era. Some of them have been done a little bit third party-ish, some of them have been done by themselves. But one of the ones I want to point out in the most recent era is the Lego games. And some of you may think I'm kidding when I say this, but I actually fully endorse the Lego series of games they've been doing. They're actually really fun and really enjoyable, especially if you get into that kind of, I don't even know what to call it. It's hard to explain how cartoonishly amusing it is, because it's not actually it's non sequitur parody, and it's really pulled off well. But the gameplay itself is actually really smooth and interesting and enjoyable. And the take on the movies that they do, the Lego games, there's the Indiana Jones trilogy and the Star Wars sixology or whatever, and they're actually really good games, and I really do recommend them for anybody who wants to pick them up. So, blah, as they say. But I do think overall the quality has noticeably declined, just because if I were to compare the Lego games, which are great, to Tales of Monkey Island or the Indiana Jones ones or anything like that, yeah. Next question. What are my thoughts on the Unreal 4 engine? I'm really excited about the Unreal 4 engine. The Unreal engine in general has always been basically the pinnacle of gaming design graphics engines, and I am really excited about what that thing can pull off and how well it's going to pull it off. I have not had time to read the article you linked me just yet, but I do have it saved. In fact, it's right there on my web and my browser, ready to go whenever I get time. So I will be reading it eventually. Um, but I do have a lot of hope for what games can be made on it. It's like Doom 3. I believe Penny Arcade made this comment about Doom 3 about, wow, what an amazing looking game. I can't wait till somebody makes a game out of it. But no, in all seriousness, the Unreal Engine has always been amazing ever since the very first one, and so lots of hope, lots of anticipation there. We'll see what they do with it. Um, Goodness, this one was kind of, I had to kind of chop this one up because this gentleman sent me several paragraphs of text. So I did read it. I just, for the sake of the question answering, what are my thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and my thoughts on putting together DC doing something similar? I mentioned this briefly before, I believe, about how I really do endorse the fact that they have an actual continuity and a sense of canon within the Marvel movies now, ever since the most recent Hulk, I guess. I can't remember if that was the first one or not. But I think that was a good move, and I think that having that sense of canon and signing the long-term contracts so the same actors come back for the same movies is a good idea, and really helps the movies to grow and show what kind of what they can do with that sort of thing. And the Avengers movie is an excellent example of them pulling that out to a pinnacle. Do I think DC should do something similar, culminating in a Justice League movie? Yes and no. DC has always translated slightly more difficultly to the cinematic than Marvel has, with the sole exception of Batman. And so pulling that off would be more difficult, but I do think that if they did pull it off, it would actually work really well. So if they got the right directors team, if they got the right writers, if they got the right actors, then yeah, I think that'd be really cool. Did I watch the Green Lantern movie, and did I like it? Yes, I did. And yes, I did. I heard a lot of complaining about it. I'm not sure why. I enjoyed it perfectly fine. I probably wouldn't have picked him as my first choice for Hal Jordan, but he did a decent enough job about it. And I thought the movie was actually pretty cool. Interesting take on parallax, but you know, whatever. They had to do something, and I liked it. So moving on. What are my thoughts on the Wii U? Um, I kind of already answered this question. Any console has to sit on its game library. Right now, the Wii U has 0 games on it that I'm interested in. That's probably going to change, knowing Nintendo. To date, I actually can't think of I can think of one, I'm sorry, I can think of one Nintendo console that has come out that I have not ended up buying because the library justified it. That would be the Virtual Boy, in case you're curious. So we'll see. But as of right now, I have no plans of buying one. Shrug. We'll see what happens. Um, what is my stance on used games significantly hurting the bottom line of developers? This is actually a very complicated situation, the whole used games thing, because there is some actual data to support the fact that used games do hurt sales for developers. I personally don't agree with that for my own reasons, which I've labeled before, and I don't want to go into now because my throat's really starting to give me problems. But I will say one thing, and that is the fact that I strongly disagree with taking choice and options away from a player, away from an audience for that matter. And so if you get to the point where you refuse an audience, a target audience of any type, in any genre, in any medium, an option to play your game, video, TV show, whatever, used, you have stepped over a line. And I do not agree with that. And especially since all that's going to do is encourage them to if they essentially get a monopoly on it, then they can charge whatever they want and do whatever they want with it, and it will only get worse over time, as indeed has been true across all of human history whenever a monopoly has been established. So I am very strongly in favor of continuing to have used games, and hope that that will remain true in the future. Oh my goodness, yes, water. Mm. Am I aware of the game Spellforce? No, I'm not. I am aware of the games Enyo. Not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I did play the Enyo 2070, I believe, and it was actually a really good game. And got me into the series. I enjoyed it. It was not. I'd say it's a good game. Again, popcorn game. Not a game I'm probably going to replay, but it was enjoyable. I liked it, and I really thought the pseudo, economic empire building, city building mishmash there obviously had some lacking qualities from games that focus on one of those things, but nonetheless was an enjoyable mix of all of the above. And that's my thoughts in a nutshell. Did I play Harvest Moon? I played a couple of Harvest Moons. I actually enjoyed them more than I thought I would. I can't remember which ones they were. They were both in the GBA. Actually, no, I think one of them was on the SNES. One of them was the SNES, one of them was on the Game Boy Advance. And in both cases, I did enjoy the game. Again, popcorn game, not a game I'm going to replay. I can't even properly explain why I enjoyed it though. But there was something cathartic about the sheer simplicity of, how do I put this? Because I don't want to say simple like it's an insult. It's more like simple as in I don't have to mentally create massive flowcharts in order to properly play this game properly, like say Pokemon does, for example. Pokemon is a game of surprising depth and complexity for anybody who really gets into it and really goes into the full length of it. Harvest Moon, by contrast, was a game I could just play casually and was like, hey. And I really got into the non-violent gameplay. I do actually enjoy games that are non-violent. I've always been a fan of SimCity and that kind of thing. So I enjoyed that, and I liked it. Like both of them, I should say. Let's see, what's the next question here? Have you seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven, and what are your thoughts on the controversy about it? No, I have not seen that movie, which is a shame. I talked to a friend about it just today, actually, and he said it was pretty good, and he enjoyed it. He wasn't sure what controversy there was about it. I imagine it has to do with the topic of the movie, obviously. I personally don't think that the movie is one that justifies controversy, if that makes any sense. Yes, it's talking about sensitive issues, but it's not doing it in a way that I personally think could be construed as intentionally insulting. Unintentionally insulting is something else. That's something that cannot be helped. But that is also something that should not be used against, that should not be held against the person who does it, or the company that does it, or whatever. So that's just my thoughts on it. Obviously, I don't have the ability to comment on it in depth because I never saw the movie. So feel free to take this for me being an ignorant idiot, as it is. Next question. Can we please be best friends and run off into the sunset together? No, we cannot. because my leg hurts and I don't feel like running right now. Blah, 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 couple questions. Whoops, I'm sorry, I skipped on. Okay, what are my favorite Pokemon, or which one per element? Ah, shoot, I should have wrote down names. I do actually have several favorite Pokemons. My favorite element is Ghost for reference, even though it's actually difficult to use properly because of how glass cannon they tend to be and how easy it is to prey on their weaknesses. I try to make it a point to have a Ghost primary as one of my main party members in all such cases. Other than that, I really like all the EVs, especially Espeon. That's always been a favorite of mine. I've always liked Mew, even though I can never use her. She's just cute. Um, I've always had a thing for Furret from the second generation and onwards. I can't even explain that, but he's very useful. He can use a lot of HMs, and he's really cute, so that works for me. I've always had a thing for, excuse me, Dragonair, and there's actually quite a few I really like. I'm trying to think of the name of the other one I was trying to say. It's a grass psychic type. I'm gonna have to look this up real quick. Give me just a moment. Mm. But as far as one per type, I actually tried to do that once for an unrelated reason, and it was actually harder to do than I thought because there's so many types where I like several of them, and picking Gardevoir, that's the one. Gardevoir is the one I really like from the psychic type. But it's so difficult to pick because even just looking at psychic list, I'm looking at the list right now. There's Alakazam, that's always been a favorite of mine. Mew, as I just mentioned. Espeon, I already talked about her. Gardevoir, of course. And I liked all three of the emotion ones, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. You know, I could go on about this, but you get the idea. It's hard to pick because I like a lot of them. I don't like all of them, but I do like quite a few. What is your favorite faction in Warcraft 3? That's actually a tough one. If you're talking about to play as from a purely gameplay perspective, humans. I was incredible with humans. I really knew what I was doing with them, and I could pull off some. I had a mage army concept that was brilliant. Um, and it worked really well. What is my opinion on, if we're talking about, I'm sorry, let's go back to the question. If we're talking about from a lore perspective, I'm really torn on that one because all of them are interesting for their own reasons. You know, the human nations are certainly fractious and have their own problems, but are still people who are trying to do basically the same, the right thing. The orcs really are. That was when they were really hitting their stride on becoming more than just the unstoppable demonic horde and really actually becoming a culture of their own, and so I really got behind that. The Night Elves, of course, had their own ancient setup, and they were just being introduced in Warcraft 3, but they still did a good job of introducing them to us, and I liked everything I saw. And of course, the Scourge. I've always been a big fan of the Scourge. Um, the Lich King himself, the first Lich King in that case, was still an interesting character, and the way the Scourge functioned was interesting. And that concept of using undeath and having people willingly join undeath because of how screwed up the world has gotten and had gotten at that point in time was fascinating to me. And I love the fact that people would willingly sign up rather than just this undead zombie army that consumes as it goes. Now, granted, it did that as well, but there were a lot of willing converts, and that's one of the reasons the Scourge was so successful. Goodness. What are your opinion on the happen to the culture, story, and life of the Night Elves? Oh, those poor people. The Night Elves are pretty much your classic Fall from Grace story. Done, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. It is very well done. But the way the Night Elves rose and rose and rose and then plummeted and then rose up again very slowly over 10,000 years and then plummeted again was interesting to me. And I do like the Night Elves, especially at the now sense. And I do think that I do think they're probably going to be doing the same thing again. Historically speaking, it's very likely. But I do think that I'm sorry, I don't want to go too much in detail because that's going to take a while and that's a long and costly story. But let me just summarize. I like the story of the Night Elves. I like the culture of the Night Elves. I personally would probably not choose to be a Night Elf if I had to pick one culturally speaking, societally speaking. But I could see wanting to be part of that, and I'm with that. So, moving on. Next question. Ah. I had issues with the rather radical community of WoW, such as, having to do rather extensive things to raid. Did you ever have troubles? No, I did not. Um, and I don't mean this to sound like bragging, so I apologize. But I've never had issues with hanging with the hardcore crowd in WoW. I was one of the people in the hardcore crowd for 3 sections of WoW's existence, and I was one of those people on the bleeding edge going for world first, that kind of thing. And so that's never something I've ever had a problem with. I used to theorycraft late into the night trying to figure out the exact numbers and exactly how exactly things can function like that. So I've never had an issue with that, but it's worth noting that I also made a point of never putting down anybody who couldn't keep up, basically, because that's just not cool. Now, you may not be able to raid with me in my I'm going for heroic world first team, because of obvious reasons, but I'm not going to exclude you as a person. I'm not going to put you down as a person. It's just I got to go to this now. Besides being, oh yes, this wasn't a question, but the person mentioned something about how irritating it was and boring. Oh, I'm sorry, not boring. How irritating it was to be killed by bored players in a 20+ area. It sounds like you were playing on a PvP server, and that pretty much highlights the reason I don't like playing on a PvP server. I don't like unrestricted PvP, and I don't like non-option PvP. I like PvP when I feel like it. I do not enjoy constantly having to be aware of the fact that while I'm doing quest A, I have to be aware that there might be other players in the area. I don't like that. I never have. I like the option. If I'm going to PvP, I want to PvP. If I'm going to play the game and PvE, I want to PvE. So one of the reasons I like the Guild Wars thing, it's so completely segregated. It might as well be different games, and I like that. Did I miss having a pet companion in the Lorerunner? No, I didn't actually. I like how they did Lorerunner, and the way they did Lore Masters was an excellent way to have that pet companion experience in Lotro. Do you think in the long term that Lotro will survive? Yes, I do, because they've already found their niche. They've already found their little category, and they're already making money. And Turbine has already proven that they can keep an MMO going for a long time. Point in case, Asheron's Call is still going right now. So I do think it will survive in the long time. I don't think it's really going to go anywhere. But that's fine. It doesn't have to, as long as it's still making money and paying for itself. What do I think about the whole Blizzard Cloud? He goes into some detail here. I love the Blizzard Cloud idea. I think it's a fantastic way of doing things. I have already registered all the games I can on it. All of them, basically, except for Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 1, and I think that's it. And Diablo 1. All the rest are all registered there, so like right now, I could go download any of them right now on my laptop or on any computer I'm at, anywhere. All I have to do is sign in and download it. I love that. I love that option. I love that concept. I think it's a great way to do digital distribution. Talking about being able to be on a holodeck, I would love to be able to run through Middle-earth and whatnot, but I'm concerned about shooters like Counter-Strike where you really kill other humans or people. I think it's kind of a blurry line. What do you think about that? Again, there would have to be some kind of restraints or controls on it, but it's worth noting that the more you romanticize it, the easier it will be. But the best way I can answer this question, pardon me, is by referring to something in real life that people do to shoot other people for fun. Paintball. And I don't think there would be any more problems than someone going to a paintball game, except for the fact that it would hurt less, because a paintball gun hitting you right here kind of hurts. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. In the holodeck, all you'd feel is little, bzz, and you're out. You're tapped out, and that's it. So I think it worked really great. All you have to do is program it right. You mentioned that you have a dialect and you're not native. Do you speak several languages? Yes and no. I have this really weird problem where if I start getting into the flow of a language, of any of the languages I know, I can start speaking them rather, well. Not great. I have problems with grammar, and I admit this. But I could do Spanish to a degree. I could do Russian, and to a very small degree, I could do Greek, and that's basically it. And I know very, very, very little of other languages, which is unfortunate. I wish I could do more, but time again. Do you like Easter eggs in game? Yes, I love Easter eggs in game. Next question. I'm trying to rush through this because I got to go home in 12 minutes. There were a lot of people that were upset about Harbinger being downgraded to a cameo. I actually mentioned this in my Mass Effect 3 comments. I actually thought he was going to be a boss when he came down, rather than just a cameo. I was very upset about that, and so, yeah, who knows, maybe they'll fix it. In the Q&A, I mentioned interplay with Star Trek the 25th anniversary. The one I was referring to was Judgment Rights, that's correct. That was the other game. What did I think about these games? I thought they were fantastic. I loved them. I played them a lot. What was my favorite part about them? The fact that they actually successfully merged a series I liked with a game that was actually enjoyable, rather than just being a game that was clearly just trying to take from the success of the already successful series and not actually be a good game on its own rights. They were good games on their own rights, even if it was not Star Trek. If Star Trek never existed, they were still good games. So that's what I like most about them. I'm actually not going to answer this next question per se. If you know who you are, it's talking about Babylon 5 and the ending. But I'm not going to answer it directly because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't watched Babylon 5. I know several of my viewers have started watching Babylon 5 as a result of me, which is awesome. Hey, Babylon 5 is great. But what the question is do I think the individual actually died, or do I think he was taken beyond the rim? Um, that's a tough one, and I do think that was left for the opinion of the viewer, so I think it's up to the individual to decide. My personal take on it, I don't think he actually died. I think something happened that is beyond basic comprehension, something that can't be explained so simply, and I think that would be awesome, and that's just the way I like to think of it, so moving on. What is my opinion of the Sonic the Hedgehog series? Do you think it's declined since the Genesis era? No, I do not, actually. I enjoyed Sonic Generations. I enjoyed Sonic Colors. I enjoyed Sonic Unleashed. And the only one of the modern era I really didn't like was Sonic and the Black Knight or Sonic and the Dark Knight or whatever it was. And it was still a decent game. It's just the flick thing really got to me. So no, I don't think it's been on the downrise. I still would probably call Sonic 2 my favorite of all the Sonics, way back in the Genesis. But I still enjoyed the modern Sonics a lot, so I don't really think it's on the decline, and I don't get why people keep being like, oh, it's terrible, because I enjoy it. Maybe I'm just weird, I don't know. Have I ever played the classic LucasArts games? Whoops, this is a repeat, isn't it? Whoops, I apologize. Do I have a forum? No, I do not. I have no real intention or plans of making one. I sincerely doubt there's a need for one. It was just a question being asked because I mentioned getting questions from several sources. No, a forum is not one of those sources. It's just, yeah. Final question, and then I gotta pack up and go. What is my take? This is actually a rather massive article. Basically, this person was talking about his personal thoughts, or her personal thoughts on Hawk's motivations in Dragon Age 2, and they were essentially selfless motivations of how they were working for their family and their friends and their loved ones, and once all those people left their life, the person stopped playing the game because they felt that there was no more motivation to continue. While that is a very valid way to look at that, and a very valid way to think of that, in my personal thoughts and my personal feelings of the matter, even in the worst case scenario, which you experienced first, where Hawk lost everyone, I personally think that should be more a motivator to continue on than the one to stop, because yes, there's no one else to help that is they have a personal relationship with, but there are other people to help. First of all, in general, Lord knows Kirkwall needed the help, but second of all, that's a defining character moment. When you've lost everything, when a person, a real person, has lost everything. I've always said this. This is getting a little serious. I've always said that you really know who you are when you've lost everything, when you're at your bottom. And I've been there myself. I could tell you it in detail. I'm not going to, because that would involve remembering it, and I don't want to. But you know who you really are when you're at your absolute bottom. And one of my favorite examples of that in fiction is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Khan showed who he really is when he hit rock bottom. He was interested in revenge. He was interested in the return to power. He was interested he turned basically even more to evil than he already was. He showed his true color, so to speak. Kirk, by the other example, had showed himself, and over the next several movies, to be the anti-Khan, to have been lost everything, lost his friend, lost the Enterprise, and kept going, if you understand what I mean, and kept going with the best aspects of humanity, and still strived in spite of this adversity. He came out of that crucible as a good person, you know what I mean? And so I personally think Hawk would have kept going even after having lost everything, because I personally view Hawk as a good person, and that is someone who would want to go on even if they had lost everything, even if there was no visible reason to do so, if you follow what I'm saying here. There's a trope for this, and there's a concept. It's called What You Are in the Dark, or Alone in the Dark, if you prefer. And I've always been a fan of that being executed properly. And in my version of Hawk, and my personal feelings of Hawk, Hawk was a good person, even alone in the dark. And so they would have kept going, even after having lost everything and having no actual reason to keep going, because it's the right thing to do, if you follow what I'm saying here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this now. Maybe I'll get it uploaded tonight. I don't know. But either way, I'll talk to you guys later.